Okay, everyone, welcome to this discussion on the Jewish war against whites. I want to make it clear right up front that the Jews are and ever have been waging war against Gentiles across the board, but specifically, more than any other culture, they want to take the white race out completely. And they're using other races, uh, particularly especially in the past few years, right, through BLM, Antifa. They've been using certain elements within the black community to do that, to blame whites for the slave trade when in fact they were behind it. They've done this all through history. They hate all Gentiles, but they'll use certain Gentiles against other Gentiles. In the past, it was sicking the Muslims on the Christians, or vice versa, right? With the phony war on terror. Whoever's a problem for them, they'll use another group, befriend them, not genuinely, they'll fake that they're friends just to use them. And then later, after they're done using them, they'll sick another group on them, right? This is what they've always done. They sided with the Babylonians, funded them. Then later, they sided with the Persians and sicked them on the Babylonians. Later, the Macedonians sicked them on the Persians. Later, the Romans sicked them on the Macedonians, on and on and on. Right now, though, their main aim is to take out white society, right? Because it has been all through the past, 1,000 years plus that they have had the greatest resistance. They have been thrown out of one European country after another, multiple times from the same country, in fact. So they want to destroy white culture, white civilization, whites in general because of that, right? Because they know that, we can be a big problem for them, but also as revenge. How dare you stand up to us in the past? We're going to punish you now for not letting us get away with our crimes before, So they've got many reasons for doing that. And so they're using other groups, but ultimately, and this is what's so pathetic, when you look at BLM, Antifa, the very ones funding you and pretending to be your friends now, they're going to kick you in the teeth later. It's what they always do. They're friends to none, especially Gentiles. They're not even friends to Jews, low-level Jews, right? Their only friends are themselves at the top rungs of the ladder. Uh, you know, if low-level Jews can benefit from their schemes, well, that's fine. But in the meantime, until they get what they want, they're cannon fodder too. They will especially kick you in the teeth, though, if you're what they like to call self-hating Jews. If you don't go along with their agenda, if you actually oppose it, speak against it, oh, they want you dead even more than Gentiles. But anyway, before I get into this discussion, I just want to mention I have quite a few more topics on, Israel's crimes, but I figured, I kind of beat that horse into the ground. There's a lot more to be said on that wretched criminal enterprise, that fake nation, that illegitimate country, and I'll come back to it later. But I didn't want to continue on and on into endless perpetuity. You get the point. It's a criminal state. It ever has been right from the beginning. Uh, it was conceived in corruption. It's been criminally corrupt ever since. Everything it's ever done has been a fraud, a lie, a crime. It's not even open for debate. It should have been shut down a long time ago. And it wouldn't exist. It wouldn't have continued to exist except for first Britain and then later the United States, uh, you know, supporting it and sending our military over there and giving them, weapons and jets and, on it goes. Our technology, most of it has been handed to them. On occasion, they've stolen some of it as well and gotten away with it. But anyways. So, um, like I said, I'll get back into talking about Israel some more down the line. There's so many more crimes: human trafficking, drug trafficking. They lead the pack. But I'll get back into that later. For now, we're gonna go off into some other tangents here. Starting with this topic, the Jewish war against whites. And it's gotten very serious. It's been going on for a while, but it's getting to the point now where even a great many whites are waging war against their own selves, against their own culture. They've been made to feel guilty for things that they did not even create, right? The Jews created slavery, for example, right? Jews created it. Sure, there were white slave owners, but the whole enterprise wouldn't even have existed in the first place, except for those evil bastards. And they walk scot-free, don't they? For the most part, the black community has not figured that out. Some have, and have been very outspoken about it, and good for them. Hats off to them. But the black community in general still, it just doesn't get it. That they're the ones responsible. If you want reparations for slavery, well, those are the ones to go after to get it. And they're the ones that have all the money too, don't they? That they've stolen from everyone else. But anyway, like I said, they're waging war, and always have, against all Gentiles, but particularly whites, especially today. Whites of European descent are involved in a war of racial survival. But again, most whites don't even know it, don't even understand it. Clearly, it's come more into the fore in the past few years. There now is a general awareness that something isn't right, that whites are being targeted. But for those that are aware of it, they certainly, for the most part, are not aware of who is actually behind it. People like Alex Jones will say, "Oh, it's the left, it's the left." Oh, it's the Jew. It's the Jew. Always has been. Many of those who have had it brought to their attention, this war being waged on whites, have stubbornly persisted in a state of blissful ignorance, or have retreated into a state of denial, right? And they somehow think that if you talk about this subject and want to try to preserve white culture, that somehow you're a Nazi, you're a white supremacist. All of that is a Jew creation. Clearly, there are some out there who are, who can be labeled, quote, white supremacists in the sense that they define it, where you think you're better than everyone else. And, yeah, those people do exist. But they want to label everyone like they're radical, fanatic, hateful terrorists and bigoted. And, no. But I do have to say, though, that, yeah, such people do exist. And I certainly do not endorse that. The way to combat this problem, the way to rectify it, is not to go to the other extreme. What we need to do is not become white supremacists. We need to become white restorationists, right? To restore our image, and not let ourselves be denigrated, and certainly not participate in the denigration of the white race. But to go to the opposite extreme, to the point now where, we need to claim that we're superior to everyone else and all the other races are beneath us. No. That's very Jewish of you, you white supremacists out there. Yeah. So keep playing that game. Many of you are doing it knowingly, of course. But for those of you who have been fooled by this, you're playing right into the hand of the very people that you claim to be fighting against. You're doing just what they want, and you're helping to give the wrong impression to white society and those outside of white society, that those who are frustrated with this war on whites are simply just that: hateful, bigoted, self-exalting white supremacists. You have the same attitude as the Jews. That's what Christian identity is, isn't it? Of course it is. Of course it is. They're so disgusting. They not only are playing the Jew game, they're actually identifying themselves as the biblical Jews, the biblical Israelites, the biblical Hebrews. Really? You're proud of those people? You're proud of that heritage? You're proud of that disgusting and despicable religion of theirs and their monstrous mass-murdering deity? Well, have at it. But don't you dare claim that you're righteous, that you're the good guys. Not when you embrace that kind of twisted, sick philosophy. You are white supremacists. You deserve that title and all of the evil that goes along with it. You are that evil. You are literally white supremacists. That's not the answer to the problem of the war being waged against whites. You are the problem. Anyway, what we have here is, again, a war of what is often called reverse discrimination, right? The Jews always do this. To take us away from one extreme, they always introduce the other extreme. No, no. The answer isn't to the extreme right, to the extreme left. Very often the solution is somewhere in the middle, right? To combat, prejudice against blacks that was prevalent years ago, right? They're still trying to make it look like it's prevalent today. No, it isn't. It's not prevalent at all. There's still a few people that are prejudiced against blacks, but it's almost non-existent. But the Jews want to revive that, right? They want a race war. This is what they were trying to do a few years ago with the BLM and Antifa riots, right? They wanted to revive it. It didn't work, though. The whole thing collapsed. But the answer to the problem of what used to be, prejudice against blacks is not to introduce, this idea of, reverse discrimination, which came about through affirmative action, right? You don't give blacks rights to the point where whites don't have rights anymore. You don't hire someone just because they're black and now whites don't get the job if they're more qualified. No, no, no. That actually creates resentment, doesn't it? And that's what it was all designed and is designed to do, and is doing and has ever done. Their solution to their so-called solution to prejudice against blacks created more prejudice against blacks, right? Made it more virulent. Of course you're going to get resentments when white people are turned down, even though they're qualified, just because they're white, and the black man now is showing special favoritism. The Jews are behind that. They want whites and blacks fighting. It's time for blacks and whites to realize this, to recognize who the real enemy is, and to join together against this common enemy instead of fighting against each other, which is just what these wretched criminal little bastards from the pits of hell want. Anyway, as an important part of this war against whites, notice how, not just in this country, but in all, mostly, or what used to be mostly white-based societies, European-based societies, right? All across European countries, Canada, New Zealand, Australia, you have this mass influx of illegal immigrants coming into these countries. They're doing this to destroy the white race, right? To so intermix the cultures. I'm not against interracial marriage. Good heavens, whoever you fall in love with, marry him. But what they're doing with massive, massive flooding, millions and millions, they're not going through the process of, legal immigration. They're not becoming citizens. They're not made to swear an oath of allegiance. And the money that they're making here is not being kept here. A lot of it's going overseas. This is all designed to destroy. No country can survive when you have that going on. And let me state again for the record, not only are whites losing in this little game of theirs, but the other races coming into white countries are also losing. They're losing their identity as well. So even though the war is primarily against whites where these mass migration policies are taking place, and I'm going to get into that in much more detail later. We're going to see just how Jewish it actually is. But the other races are losing too. It's a war against all Gentiles, primarily whites, yes, but all Gentiles are losing in this game, and they're loving it. Yet all the while, in their little illegitimate country, you don't have that going on at all, do you? They're very careful about who they let in their country, very careful to preserve their culture, their race, if you want to call it that. Their defective, inhuman race, and they are inhuman in every sense of the word. They hate humanity. They don't possess qualities of human beings, so they're not human. I'm not saying they're lizard people like David Icke, but they're not human. They don't meet the definition of they're enemies of humanity, right? They hate humanity. So their own actions justify my claim. They're not human. They're animals. No, I don't even like to use that word because there's a lot of animals that are actually very compassionate. So can't even use that term for them. They're, brute beasts. Anyway, but one of the main arsenals in their weapons in their arsenal of their war against whites is this mass frickin' immigration policy. What an abomination, man. And yet here they are getting away with it. You would think that people on a much grander scale would be catching on to this. Well, it is happening. People are finally starting to get it. But you would think that would make them more aware that, there's something going on when you have this happening in multiple countries all at once. That, we're looking at a system now that is centrally controlled across the entire globe. Of course, COVID itself should have told people that, right? It's not just one country or a few countries. When you have things like this going on a global scale, obviously there's a central power that's running the entire world that has all the politicians and all the nations of the world in their pocket, little puppets dancing to the same tune, right? You can't have this happening if world leaders were actually not all on the same page, right? It's high time people wake up to what's going on here. There is a central authority dictating policies so that you have all this mass influx of illegals in country after country after country. So you have things like the fake COVID measures being imposed on everyone in country after country after country. There is a central authority dictating all of this. What is that central authority? That's the question. People need to wake up to the fact that corrupt criminal Jew bastards are the ones behind all of the world's woes. All of them. Anyway, another means through which they've been waging this war against whites is the so-called equal opportunity employment and, again, affirmative action, right? It's not equal, though, is it? It's not. Affirmative action isn't pro-black. It's actually anti-white. It's made out to look like pro-black. They don't care about blacks any more than they do whites. They don't give a damn, right? But they're using blacks or certain segments of the black community. They're using them to wage war against whites under the guise of caring for them. Absolutely revolting. Um, Another way they wage this war against whites, of course, is simply through propaganda in the movies, TV shows, where whites are demeaned as bigots, ignoramuses, and hate mongers, right? And again, as I said, it's not just non whites, it's whites themselves on a grand scale that have fallen for this. It's got to stop. Whites have almost completely lost this war without even firing a shot, so to speak, in their defense, right? This thing has got to turn around or we will become extinct. Remember what Mr. Biden said? That, I forget his exact words, I'm paraphrasing, but he was talking about how the percentage of whites in this country is dwindling, and that by the year, I don't know, 2050, whites will be a minority. And he said, that is the source of our strength. He actually said that. You remember that one? It's the source of our strength that whites are diminishing in numbers in this country, right? That the percentage is dropping. What do you think he meant by that? And who's the our? He's obviously not identifying as a white person to have said that, right? What is he identifying as? Yeah, right, right. Picture him with his little yarmulke on when he says that, like what he wears when he goes before the Wailing Wall. All our presidents, folks, every one of them has had Jewish blood in their veins. Every single one of them. Some less than others, but they're all part of the bloodline. They always have been. That's the source of our strength. Can you not see that our presidents, for the most part, have been all too willing participants in this war against white culture, right? White civilization. They're assisting, aiding, abetting in this war. And it's not just the lefties. Oh, the righties, they got to tiptoe very carefully. The Republicans, right? They don't do it so openly as the lefties do, but they're still doing it. They're still part of that war, right? They just have better rhetoric to fool old Whitey into thinking that they're on their side. Oh, no, they're not. Trump is every bit as much a part of this as Biden. God damn it. Anyway, like I said, this war is not just going on here, it's going on in all European based countries, right? This mass influx of illegals to dilute and ultimately destroy white civilization. And in the process, yes, all the other cultures that are intermixing too. They're all losing. Everybody's losing their identity, their culture. And that's communism too, isn't it? Of course it is. Everybody looks the same, acts the same, and follows the same corrupt, tyrannical rules by the central authority. It's communism to the max. If it looks like a war, feels like a war, sounds like a war, costs like a war, and hurts like a war, then you guessed it, it very likely is a war. People think that wars have to involve tanks and bombers and machine guns, No, 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 no. There's all kinds of warfare. And the more subtle versions are actually even more destructive, more dangerous, because they're often not recognized. And that's the problem with this war. It's not recognized. People don't realize, a great many still don't realize, even though there have been, there has been a grand awakening. There's still a lot, though, that aren't getting it. They're not seeing the war that's going on right before their eyes, all around them, every day, 24/7. So anyway, let's take a look at this war in some detail to see that, yes, this is exactly what's going on and that it is the Jews behind it. Let's first look at looks like a war. Does it look like a war? Just take a look at many of the lawless, uh, blighted, non-white sections of our country today, right? Places like Detroit, East St. Louis, parts of Los Angeles. I was just out there recently, and yeah, you got all the tent communities, homeless. You know, it used to be minorities, right? Now, oh no, no, no. Now, a great many whites also have been, and COVID had a lot to do with that, didn't it? Shutting down businesses. Oh, people suffered across the board all over the world, right? But again, primarily the war was being waged in white European based countries. Look at a typical dilapidated apartment building in a big city, subsidized by, you know, government housing, right? Replete with broken windows, bullet marks in the walls. Look at the streets of Philadelphia. There's whole channels on YouTube dedicated to just, you know, showing clips, people walking down various streets in Philadelphia, showing the people strung out on fentanyl. I'm trying to think of this one channel I used to watch a couple years ago. It's horrific. Horrific. People, blacks and whites, are walking around like freaking zombies, just standing in the middle of the sidewalk and kind of wavering back and forth with their head down. They're falling asleep while standing up, and they keep, like, they'll catch their balance before they fall, but then they don't, you know, sit down. They don't know enough to. They'll fall right back to sleep again a few moments later. It literally zombies, zombies. This one guy that had the channel, this particular channel I was watching. I think he was a Christian, a black guy. Really nice guy, though. You know, he was going up and, you know, trying to help some of these people. He's talking to this one young girl, and he's like, do you realize what this drug is doing to you? He says, can I just point something out to you? He says, look at your feet. Her feet had the skin peeling off. He says, you do know that being caused by the drug, right? By the fentanyl. You know, you're gonna lose your feet. You're not gonna be able to walk. You know, eventually it's gonna kill you. You know, and she's nodding her head in agreement. Yeah, she knows, but she still feels that she needs that drug to get her through the day. Oh my God, man, is it disgusting? People are dying left and right every day from this stuff, and the Jews who introduced this couldn't be the more happy for it. So this is a big part of, again, this war on white culture, right? Yes, there's other groups too that are caught up in this, but oh, it's really starting to affect the white community more and more and more, folks, which again is their main frickin' target. Just look at how, and this was the case even before COVID, much more so now. But for years, I've been noticing, especially in my area, you know, just driving around from town to town to town, every downtown now is almost a ghost town, right? The town where I grew up, when I was a kid, the downtown area was always hustling and bustling. It was always busy. Any day you would go, you'd see people, you know, on both sides of the streets. Uh, all the stores were open and businesses were booming. You know, you go down those, you know, that's that main street now in that town, and all the towns surrounding, all the towns in my area. There's almost nobody walking the streets, and at least every other storefront is empty for rent signs, right? Most of the businesses, or at least half of them in any given town now, are closed. It's unbelievable. I'm not a big movie fan. Most movies suck today, but you know, I go with friends quite a bit to movies just for something to do, you know. And then we'll get a bite to eat after. And I'm amazed that there's almost nobody in the theater. Almost every time we go, we're either the only ones in there, or maybe there's half a dozen others. But that's it. Movie theaters are going out. They're not even going to be around before too long. The same with malls, right? Up until about the 90s or so, the mid 90s, malls were always busy, and they had some really cool stores for men as well as women, right? You go now, there's no more stores for men. Brookstones, I used to love to go in there. That's gone. Um, Circuit City, I used to like to look at the new electronic things that were coming out. They even had a thing called Nature Company. I'm really into collecting, fossils and meteorites, minerals, artifacts. I used to love going in that store. They had all kinds of stuff like that. Not artifacts, but they had fossils and minerals, and it was just cool, to look at the selection of things they had. There was the Discover store. I think it was the Discover Channel that started that. They had some really neat stuff in there. Very interesting books, science related stuff. I would take my kids in there. Gone, 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 gone. All of these are gone. There isn't a damn thing for men in the malls anymore. Oh, and there was, Walden Books. That was another thing. I would go in there. I could spend hours in there just looking through the different titles. All of it is gone. They've wrecked everything. Barnes and Noble had initially put out of business all the local bookstores, right? They even drove out another big competitor, Borders, right? Borders went under because of Barnes and Noble. But now Barnes and Noble is starting to falter, right? I've seen 3 Barnes and Nobles near me close in the past couple of years. There aren't that many left now. They're starting to go under. This is all part of this war, folks. They're destroying everything that made life, enjoyable, pleasant. You had things to look forward to. I didn't mind going shopping with my ex and having her spend hours at the mall because I would go into those stores. I was kept busy. Now there's nothing there. Even the food court, the selection sucks. It's all part of their war on white culture to wreck everything, take away the enjoyable things in life. They get off on this, guys. They absolutely get off on it. Just like, in Orwell's 1984 book, right? The comment that I think it was Winston saying this, or Winston was told this. The image of the future traced out in my mind is a boot stomping on the human face forever. And again, they're doing it across the board with all Gentile societies, but especially uh, white based. Again, that's where all the mass immigration of illegals is taking place, right? It's not taking place in non white countries, it's just the white countries. Again, the other races coming into those countries, they're losing too, but it's primarily white based societies they're waging war at in this way. How about feels like a war? Does it feel like a war? Get into a crowded big city bus or a subway one of these days, or just walk down the halls of a high school in a large city, or take a stroll through some Los Angeles gang district. You'll get the feel of racial hostilities, I can assure you. And the Zio bastards are behind all of this. How about sounds like a war? You might listen to the gunshots and sirens that resonate on any given night from just about any of our heavily populated inner city areas, right? And in cities along the southern border states, you can hear all of the lethally malicious anti-white Reconquista speeches of mestizo activists, right? This is a war. And again, there's only one group we can really blame for all of this: the Jews. It's sad, that, uh, a lot of white people get mad at blacks, they get mad at Hispanics, they get mad at, you know, the illegal aliens. And I really don't get mad at them personally. The ones I get mad at are the criminals that come over here and, yeah, commit crimes. And, you know, there are a lot of them there are black supremacists, right? Just like there's white supremacists. There are black supremacists. Sure, they exist. But you know what? Even though I am angry with them and they're evil and part of the problem, they're not the source of the problem, right? It's the Jews. I would like to see these people get educated. You want to get angry? You want to rise up? You want to smash some windows, break into homes and steal things? Why don't you do that with the right people, the ones who created your problems and our problem? Your problems as blacks or Hispanics and our problems as whites. It's the same people. It's the elite Jew bastards. You want to break some windows? Break theirs. I'm all for that, baby. I'll even help you. And I know someone's going to say, "Oh, you're inciting violence." No. I'm just saying, if you're going to get angry and want to bust some heads, target the right people. It's got to happen eventually. The elite Jews, the billionaire buddies club, they're the ones responsible for all of this. They sit back in their leather-lined chairs laughing their asses off that they can turn us against ourselves, right? Us Gentiles. Blacks fighting whites, whites fighting blacks, blacks fighting Hispanics, Hispanics fighting blacks, whites and Hispanics going at it. They love this. Because not only does it get the Gentiles to kill themselves off, but it takes attention off of them as the enemy, as the real source of the problems that we're facing, right? So again, if you're disgruntled, fed up, disgusted, and want to take action, start targeting the real problem causers. Put your talents to good use. I can't stand when I see innocent people getting targeted for something they're not even responsible for in the first place. It's just mindless. And that's just what we saw with the BLM and Antifa riots, right? Absolutely disgusting. Nothing was done about it. That's all Jewish orchestration for you right there. All the while, Soros was dropping off truckloads of bricks at key locations in inner cities, right? For the rioters, supplying them. You don't think the government knew that? You don't think the FBI knew that? Of course they did. They sat back and let it happen, answering to their Jewish masters who wanted it that way. And then they staged the January 6th incident and blamed that all on white supremacists. It was your Jew-controlled government that was behind that. And then all these arrests and They got a lot of mileage out of that, didn't they? Another thing was to instill in the minds of people the idea that rising up against the government is evil. Oh, no, it isn't. How the hell do you think this country is supposed to have started? I mean, that whole story was, fraudulent, the American Revolution. But nevertheless, it's embraced in all of our textbooks, right? That was good when a government was risen up against. That's what founded this great nation, supposedly, right? The supposed great nation. Rising up against a corrupt government. Even in the Constitution, it calls for the people to rise up and throw off the shackles of a government that is no longer serving the interests of the people, but is in fact working counter to their interests, right? The Constitution endorses it. And yet, January 6th was all about convincing you otherwise, that that's wrong, that's evil, that's bad. No, it isn't. We, in fact, have a government, don't we? That is not working in our interests, that is, in fact, working counter to our interests. It deserves to be overthrown. That's not an illegal statement. It's as legal as you can get. It's in line with the Constitution, right? It's not a white supremacist thing to say. It's not a hateful thing to say. That's what needs to happen, actually. This government is criminal. How could it not be? Look who runs it, right? This government is criminal. In fact, all governments in this world are criminal. They're all run by the same criminal enterprise of Jewish supremacist elite billionaire bastards. They gotta go, folks. It has to happen. Sooner or later, people are going to have to rise up and take them out. It's going to happen. It's the only way this is going to be fixed. It's got to happen. You don't take them out, and they're going to take all of us out. It's them or us. Either they go or we're going to go. That's it. It's the bottom line. Doesn't get simpler than that. There's no other way around it. In fact, you really don't have to overthrow, quote, the government. You have to take those bastards out. And then the government will work for us again. They're the problem. They're the ones in the way. I like to use this illustration. I've used it before. Governments in and of themselves are not bad. They're not evil. Governments are like a glove, right? A glove doesn't do anything on its own. A glove can only do something when a hand is put in it. If you have the wrong hand in the glove now is used to do bad things. If you have the right hand in the glove now is used to do good things, right? The government is just a glove. We have the wrong hand in the glove. We got to remove that hand. And then the government will work for us and be a good force in the world instead of the evil force that it is because of the evil hand. That evil hand has to be removed. And that evil hand, once again, is the elite Jew billionaire bastards club. They have to go, folks. They have to go through any means possible. And that's my dream. That's my Martin Luther King Jr. speech. I have a dream that people one day will rise up against these elite Jew billionaire bastards, finally recognizing them as the problem, rising up against them and taking them down. Then and only then can we build a real peaceful world. Then and only then can we end all the miseries, all the suffering. We could be living in a relative paradise. We would be right now, except for them, right? Remember Marcus Eli Ravage? Oh, the glories that could have been yours, you Gentiles, if we hadn't meddled in your affairs, right? There he was, not only admitting, but boasting that Jews have been behind all of our wars, all of our miseries. What glories would have been yours had we not interfered? Yeah, what glories indeed. We would, in fact, be living in a goddamn paradise right now, except for these bastards. They have got to go. And I guarantee you, even a great many low-level Jews would love to see that happen, right? Even the ones that aren't aware that the elite Jews are the ones wreaking havoc. If they could get a taste of what the world would be like without them, they would be agreeing, yeah, it's a good thing you got rid of them. I didn't know that they were the problem. Their lives are getting screwed up too. Anyway, let's move on to talking about how this war against whites costs like a war. Just look at how much of your local, state, and federal tax money goes to things like, the welfare state freebies for illegal immigrants, right? They come over here and get entitlements to benefits that American citizens can't even get or can't get so easily, right? So many people have lost their businesses, lost their homes, have become street people because of frickin' COVID. And when they go to apply for, government housing or something, they can't get on it because there's a massive waiting list comprised mostly of illegal immigrants. Look at the problems that these bastard elite Jew pigs, scum of the earth, have created for us. They're laughing in our faces that they're getting away with it, and that, in fact, most people don't even recognize what's really behind all of this. This is all the Jews doing. It is. Constant slum rebuilding projects destroyed by illegal aliens And the battle zones that they've created, again, all your tax dollars going to fixing problems like this that wouldn't have existed except for the elite Jew pig bastards war against white society, right? Gentile society in general, but more specifically, in a more concentrated way, against white society particularly. Vastly disproportionate costs of law enforcement and incarceration for illegal aliens. Again, our tax money is going to all of this. How about it hurts like a war? Yeah, this war hurts through things like phony mortgage foreclosures. Remember the housing bubble? Oh, did they have fun with that one? Offering these floating mortgages with low interest rates, right? Sure, at the time of the loan, the interest rates were low. But by design, after a year or two, or maybe 5 or 10 years, whatever, into paying the loan, suddenly they jack the interest up beyond what you can afford now and you lose your home. Do I even have to say that that was a Jew-rigged game? Of course it was. Look at the massive hemorrhaging of jobs that has been taking place. Companies going overseas. Government actually rewarding companies with tax benefits for relocating overseas. Not only was the government not doing anything to preserve your jobs, it was actually working to take your jobs away to ensure that you would lose your jobs. Really now, who do you think was behind that? Once again, Jews. It was for things like this, guys, that they have been thrown out of so many European countries over and over and over and over and over again in past centuries, right? And yet here they are doing it on a much grander scale. And our so-called elected officials, selected officials, are the ones assisting with this. They're not working for us. It's obvious who they are working for, isn't it? Then, for those that do have jobs that didn't get shipped overseas, we've seen a horrible freezing and lowering of wages as the cost of living has soared over the past several years, right? Many people can't even get a full-time job now, right? And thus, no benefits. So they're working 2, 3 jobs at 3 different places to get those 40 hours, but they have to pay for their health care. You know, in Massachusetts, you are required, you have to have insurance, right? You have to have it. They're not requiring companies to give you insurance. They're just telling you, you have to have it. Well, guess what? Not only are medical costs out of the reach of most people now, but even the cost of the goddamn health insurance is out of the reach of most people. So now they have this little so-called safety net thing in Massachusetts where if you're working and are under a certain, level of income, which most workers are, then you can get a Massachusetts assisted, healthcare program, but you're still shelling out hundreds of dollars in many cases per month, right? It's another burden added on to your already outrageous rent. You know, the average apartment here is $2,500 frickin' dollars a month. $2,500 a month. The average worker doesn't even make that much in a month, right? How the hell are you supposed to afford your rent, your car payments, your other bills, your food, which is exponentially magnified now, your food bill, right? That's gone through the roof. So the price of food has doubled in the past year, literally. And yet, now Massachusetts is forcing you, and other states have been doing this too, they're forcing you to have health insurance. You can't opt out of it, right? And the little, assistance that they give you, you're still required to shell out several $100s in addition to all these other bills that you can't even afford to pay to begin with. Look at this mess, guys. It's atrocious. And who do we have to thank for that? There's no one else but elite Jew bastards waging war against Gentiles, specifically white Gentiles. Yeah, this is going on across the board, around the world, but mostly in white-based, European-based societies, right? That's where the war is most heavily being waged. We had the bailout fiasco, right, of 2008. Oh, that was a big part of it. Of course, what took place under COVID, uh, financially was even worse, right? The biggest transfer of wealth to date was under COVID. There was already a massive disproportionate distribution of wealth in their hands, right? At the top. Now, under COVID, it's far worse than it ever was before. But that bailout thing, oh, what an abomination, man. Many people don't realize how that whole thing was orchestrated. It was primarily Goldman Sachs, who back in 1999 pushed through their lobbyists and succeeded in getting Congress to repeal the Glass-Steagall Act, which prevented them from selling toxic assets to their own clients, right? Once the Glass-Steagall Act was repealed, that's exactly what Goldman Sachs proceeded to do. Over the next 9 years, on a grand scale, they were selling toxic assets to their clients and then placing put options against them, betting against them, knowing that they were going to fail, right? And when they failed, they made off with massive wads of cash. And so it's just a matter of time before that system's going to crash, right? And it did. And when it crashed, what did Goldman Sachs do? It appealed to El Governmente. They already had this prearranged, of course. You think the government didn't know about this criminal activity going on? Of course they frickin' did. They work with, and in fact, for these elite Jew pig bastards, right? So now Goldman Sachs comes along and says, oh, you got to bail us out. We're too big to fail. And they did. At first, there was a complaint because the initial amount was $750 billion, right? Oh, but that was just the beginning. It wound up being multiplied trillions of dollars. Some people say 40 trillion. Oh, it was even more than that. Especially as the years rolled on, right? They kept shelling out more and more and more. Trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars awarded to the very criminals who set up the whole collapse or near collapse that occurred in 2008 to begin with, right? They created the economic debacle through their criminal activities, and then they get rewarded for it with trillions more. It's just like the 29 crash, right? And then FDR comes along and passes the Emergency Banking Relief Act. That was all part of the same war. That was an early example of it, but the same effect, right? It wasn't the banks that needed relief. The banks were making out on the crash that they orchestrated. And yet, to add insult to injury, FDR required everyone to hand in all of the privately owned gold to give to the Fed. And then he devaluates the money that they traded their gold in for less than a year later by 59%. I can't believe it, man. It boggles my mind what these son of a bitches have continued to get away with year after year, decade after decade, century after century. But what we have seen in just the past 80, 90 years or so with our economy, plummeting the way it has, this is their war on white civilization, right? It's primarily white culture that they've been doing this with. We've been lied into endless war after war, right? All during the Cold War and ever since. What's going on now with Israel and sending our troops over there, which could easily erupt into World War III. That might actually be their plan. Not only in the cost of lives, but again, the trillions of dollars that have been sucked out of our pockets. Can you imagine, again, what a paradise we could be living in if that money was used to create jobs, more infrastructure? And now with, advancements in technology, robotics and whatnot, we could and should only need to work 10 hours a week Did you know that back in the 14th century in England, that is in fact the situation that prevailed? Working people only needed to work 10 to 12 hours a week to earn a living. Why can't we have that today? The truth is, we could. Everybody could be living comfortably. There's no problem of overpopulation in this world. That's another one of their lies. They want to kill off a good deal of the population so it's easy to control, and so they can hoard the resources for themselves and not have to spread them around. There's plenty of resources on this planet to supply a population, to accommodate a population 10 times what we have now. And if you believe otherwise, you're falling for their BS propaganda. This world could accommodate a much larger population than what we even have now. They don't want that, though, you see. Everybody could be living comfortably, but instead we have a situation where the vast majority are suffering, living substandard lives, while the few elite Jew pig bastards at the top gorged themselves in trillions of dollars. Oh, this situation has got to be rectified, baby. Once and for all, it's got to be fixed. This thing has got to be turned around. This ship is sinking. And if it isn't turned around and headed back to shore for repairs immediately, we're going to go down, folks. They need to go down so that we don't go down. But, you know, that's another way that they've been beating us in this war. They've gotten us afraid to stand up to them or to speak out the truth, right? There's nothing bad, evil, hateful about saying that criminals have to be taken out. When I say we got to take these bastards down, that's the only way to fix this mess. I would be doing a disservice to say otherwise. It's not, I've had so many people say, oh, watch what you say. Why? Why? If you got a burglar running loose in your neighborhood, are you going to shut your mouth? Oh, don't say anything. When you know who the guy is, you're not going to speak out and point a finger. That's the guy right there. He's the one. Let's get him. He's the one we got to apprehend. God damn it, man. And so I'll say it again. If we're ever going to fix this problem that we have in our world, the criminal bastards who have created all these problems for us, they have to be taken down. Elite Jew pig bastards. Define that any way you want, but they do have to be taken down. And then we've got things like the EU, the NAU, the North American Union, the European Union. Again, all Jew creations, right? All designed to destroy, again, white culture. There's just another way that there's other unions like that too in non-white areas of the world, of course. But the biggest ones and the most devastating ones have in fact been in European-based countries, right? They're the ones suffering the most with these things. They're losing their sovereignty. More money is being funneled into these enterprises that aren't doing any good for these European-based countries, right? The EU is just a Hoover vacuum cleaner, right? Just sucking European countries dry and taking away their sovereignty, taking away their rights, right? Left and right. Oh, they're very careful. They're moving slowly, imperceptibly at first, but look where it's going. Look who's running it. How could it go any other way, right? Look at the school shootings, rapes, robberies, drug peddling, on and on and on. Who's behind all of that? The staged school shootings, I might add. But look at the fear, the horror it's inducing. People are afraid to go out to public gatherings. They don't know at any given moment if another one of these things is going to break out. They don't realize that it's their Zio pig government behind all of this. They want you living in fear and looking to them to save the day. And their version of saving the day is to what? Take away your right to defend yourselves against their tyranny by convincing you that Guns are bad. Guns are the problem, right? No, guns are your only safeguard against crime, especially government crime. And the best example of government crimes are the ones you're led to believe are the result of street people having access to guns. It's the government behind all of these shootings. I'll document a good many of them at some point down the line. When I was doing radio years ago, uh, every time one of those things would break out, I would put notes together on them. So I've covered quite a few of them over the years. None of them stand up to close scrutiny. Every single one of those damn shootings were all government staged. Sometimes there were no shots fired at all, right? Other times there were, but it doesn't matter. They're still fake in the sense that they were government orchestrated. Whether people actually did get shot or not doesn't matter. The official story has always crumbled with every one of them upon close examination. All a part of this war. They're waging war against us from every conceivable angle. Human trafficking is another one, right? Primarily whites that are and have been trafficked. Organ trafficking, primarily whites are targeted in that as well. Organized crime, also run by elite Jews, all part of the war. The pornography industry, right? Demoralizing, degrading, turning men and women into just, sex objects to be used and tossed aside. No emphasis on, a relationship and love and, none of that, right? And it's worked, hasn't it? Just look at our world today. Look at how most people don't have compassion, don't have concern anymore for their fellow human being. The Jews are reproducing their defective characters in other people. It's really disgusting, and primarily through the media. Desensitized you so that, if you see someone get shot, you don't even care. When I was in LA the past couple of weeks, I saw a fight break out. And it was so sad. Everybody was just standing around watching. Nobody said anything, did anything. Granted, I didn't either. But it was only because, this was all new to me. I never saw anything like this. I didn't know what to expect. Quite frankly, uh, the one doing the aggressing was pretty damn big. So I didn't want to take the chance that he was going to come lunging at me. And you don't know, it looked like he was on drugs. I don't know what I'm dealing with. And does he have buddies that are going to come running out of some alley? Is he packing a piece? You know what I'm saying? But it's just sad that there must have been several hundred people. And nobody, collectively, if everybody charged, you could have apprehended him, but nobody seemed to be willing to do that. There just seems to be this lack of concern. My ex-brother-in-law told me once that he saw a helicopter land on a roof of a building one time, and he was out with some other people having lunch. And anyway, the helicopter landed way over on the other side of the building where there was a landing pad. And one of the blades came off of the propeller. And right before their eyes, several people actually got beheaded. And there was just blood everywhere. It was just a horrific mess. People are, screaming. And there were several that were injured. And nobody was running over. He couldn't believe it. He said nobody was running over to attend to the injured, or, he was like the only one. He walked over and he's trying to help people, get up, big gashes in their arm or whatever, he got his cell phone out, to call for help, but nobody else seemed to be concerned. People have lost their natural affection, and a lot of this has come from, Jewish propaganda in the movies. They've desensitized people so that it's not shocking, and it doesn't incite natural human compassion for others. You don't see it that much anymore. It's horrible. People have been reduced to to subhuman levels, like the Jews themselves. This has got to stop. We got to start caring for our fellow man. And it's only going to benefit us in the long run anyway, right? If you care for others, they're going to care back for you. That's how this world is supposed to work. And the fact that it doesn't work that way, that's how these criminal bastards, to a large degree, have gotten away with what they've been pulling. Anyway, I'll stop there. I'm going to have to do this in 2 parts. Yeah, we're past the hour. All right, guys, thanks for joining me. We'll catch you in part 2. Take care.